I worked as a food delivery boy when I was almost done with high school. Most people gave extra money, so it paid pretty well, and I liked it a lot. I had to bring food to a house on the other side of town one Friday night. I drove there in 10 minutes. There was a note on the front door that told me to go around to the back. I went around to the back door, which was in the middle of the house and faced a small patio along the backyard. I was about to knock when I saw another note and stopped. It said to bring the food inside. That gave me a little worry. I went in anyway, though. It looked like a kitchen when I opened the door. A Bluetooth speaker was playing music on the kitchen table next to the door, but the room was mostly empty. I saw another note stuck on the pizza as I went to set it down. "I'll give you a tip if you bring it downstairs." I caught a glimpse of an open opening at the end of the kitchen. Stairs led down into a very dark basement. That's when I decided. This time, I thought I'd have to pass on the tip, and I was not going downstairs. That's why I left the pizza on the table and got up to leave. But then the music stopped, and a deep man's voice said, "Stop," over the speaker. "Could you go downstairs?" I wasn't going to stay for that. The door was quickly opened, and I ran out of there. The deep man's laugh could be heard as I left. I hurried back to my car and drove back to the restaurant right away. A few weeks later, I got another package while I was at work. As I drove away, I saw that it was the same strange house. I didn't want to go back there, but I had to because it was my job, and I didn't want to tell my boss I was scared. I looked at the house very carefully when I got there. There was another note on the door. I tried to change my mind and go back to the house while sitting in my car for a while. When I finally got out, I went right to the back. The sticky note on the front door, on the other hand, had something new written on it. I walked up to the door and read it once more. This time, "Come in through the front door." There was a happy face and a wink drawn on the note. I left the pizza on the front step, knocked twice, and then left. Thank goodness nothing bad happened. He may have had a reason, but I don't want to know what it was. My only wish that Saturday night was to watch TV by myself in our cabin. It was a small house out in the woods. That's why there were no homes close. My parents were on a date and wouldn't be back until midnight on the other end. It also wasn't a good idea to order pizza because the weather had clogged up all the roads. I did it anyway, about an hour ago. When I think about why it was taking so long, I remember that it's probably because the roads are slippery. Then I realize I might not get the pizza after all. I picked to watch a scary movie while sitting on the couch. I was in the cabin by myself. A sudden sound at the doorbell scared me about 5 minutes into the movie. Then I thought it might be the pizza delivery person, so I checked the front door. I was shocked by what I saw when I opened it, though. The man looked dirty and scruffy. He might have been in his 40s. He looked like he had been having a hard time for a while and might not have a house. It was very important for him to shave because his hair was long and oily. I didn't close the door right away because he had a pizza box and was dressed like a Domino's work outfit, but it looked like he rushed to put it on. His outfit had a lot of broken buttons and didn't fit him right. It looked like the name tag on his shirt was just about to come off. It said Michael Smith. He looked right at me with a big smile on his face and didn't blink once. I felt really scared when he smiled. "Hi, my name is Ted. Did you ask for a large cheese pizza?" That strange smile was still on his face. Even though I looked in my pocket for cash, I couldn't find it. After some thought, I realized that I must have put the cash on the kitchen table. But before I went to the kitchen, the front door wasn't closed all the way. In the kitchen, I take out my wallet and begin to look for the $20 bill I have. But then I stopped. Our TV was small and always showed the news. At the bottom of the screen, some words would scroll. It made my heart skip a beat when I read it. Quick update. Domino's delivery driver was discovered in a ditch, not moving. His clothes came off. I remember that the man who knocked on my door said his name was Ted, even though his name tag said Michael Smith. It looked like his clothes didn't fit right. As I put the pieces together, it gave me chills. I went back the way I came and ran to the front door. We knew it would be wide open, and sure enough, the pizza box was on the floor by the stairs. When I knew something was wrong, my heart beat fast. When I reached for my phone, it wasn't in my pocket. I felt scared when I realized I had left it charging on my desk. After that, I thought about what I could do. It was too dangerous for me to run out into the snow to the house a mile away. I couldn't hide until my parents came back. It might take hours to do that. I had to get my phone, go upstairs, and call 911. As I slowly climbed the stairs, my hands and knees were shaking. I tried not to make a sound. I could see my room when I got to the top of the last step. The door was wide open. Mind-wise, I get ready for anything that could happen when I walk into that room. I move slowly to the side of the door, making sure that no one inside can see me. After that, I stick my head into the room. There was nothing there. In fact, I left the room just the way I found it. Then I see my phone on the table next to my closet, across from my bed. I slowly come in and reach out to touch my bed. Just a few inches away, I was about to grab my phone and call the cops. I'm careful as I move forward because I'm ready for anything. I felt so much better when I finally got my phone back and called 911. Not long at all. Someone called 911 and I heard their voice. Soon, the woman on the other end of the line asked, "Send 911. "Hello, my name is Matthew, and someone is in my house," I spoke quickly. I thought I knew how to get them to send help quickly because I watch a lot of Law and Order. After that, the person in charge told me to hold on. Then I noticed something. My closet. I never opened it because I found it scary going in there at night. I hate not knowing what's there. But up until now, it had never had anything in it. The closet door slowly opened. It was just enough for me to see two eyes looking back at me. The most scary part wasn't the eyes, though. The big smile on his face is still something that bothers me. I scream. He was there. The man at the front door who said he was Ted. I ran faster than ever before. I run out of my room and into the hallway, but I can always hear footsteps behind me. When I turned around, I saw the man still smiling as he chased me. I quickly go into the bathroom downstairs and lock the door. His laugh was different from what I thought it would be. It wasn't as rough and deep as I thought it would be. He hit the door hard with his body to try to get inside. I could always hear his childish laugh after I heard him hit the door. I knew the door would give way soon. I knew it would be a while before the cops showed up, though. I looked around the bathroom. I wasn't used to it because I usually use the one downstairs. I knew what to do as soon as I saw the bathroom window, which I had not seen before. I finally made it outside after a few seconds of trouble. I liked how the cold snow felt on my feet because I had been sweating a lot. The storm was too strong for me to get up and run. It was hard to get even a few steps away from the house. Even now, I could still hear the crazy man laughing and banging on the door. He was almost inside. A few more tries would do it. He would see the open window and know I was outside. I knew that. I knew he knew what to do because I could hear his steps moving away. I looked forward and backward a lot. After that, I saw him. He had that creepy smile on his face because his head was sticking out from the side of the house. I screamed in fear again as the man, still wearing that too-tight Domino's uniform, he started tiptoeing toward me. This scared me and made me realize how crazy the man really was. Just then, I heard the sound of police sirens. It was the perfect time for them to arrive. When the man heard the sirens, he looked at me one last time, smiled even bigger, waved goodbye, and ran off into the woods. I ran to the police when they finally pulled up to the driveway, crying because I couldn't believe what had happened. There were a few lines that didn't make much sense when I tried to tell them the story. This is what I told them after they helped me calm down. 2 more police officers showed up and began searching in the nearby woods. It was pretty much dark by that point. The next few nights I didn't sleep at all. His smile kept going through my mind. My house didn't feel safe after that for a long time. Glad to say, though, that there haven't been any weird knocks on the door or anything like that since then. That man hasn't been seen since, and it's been quiet. The van still hadn't gone by me. It remained parked at the corner, and now I could see someone sitting inside more clearly. The driver was a man, but there was also someone in the passenger seat, though it was difficult to tell if it was another man or a woman. What was undeniable was the way they were looking at me. Their stares felt heavy, unwavering. They didn't look like people who were lost. You know that look someone gets when they're unsure of where they are? The way they glance around, check their phone or GPS, or maybe even stop to point at something? That wasn't happening here. There was none of that fidgeting, no map consultation, no signs of confusion. The van began creeping toward me as I approached the first of 2 smaller streets. I paused for a moment, letting them pass, but instead of driving through, the van veered slightly, coming to a stop near the middle of the road. The driver rolled down both windows, leaning out to yell something at me. "Hey, can you help?" he called. his tone carrying a strange mix of urgency and authority. Instinctively, I froze. There was something unsettling about his voice, and even though he hadn't said anything explicitly threatening, my gut was screaming at me to be cautious. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer to the van, just far enough to see the driver more clearly. He was Italian, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His skin was tanned, and he had a certain charisma that might have been charming under different circumstances. The passenger, though harder to see, appeared to be about the same age and had a similar appearance. "Where are you trying to go?" I asked hesitantly, keeping a safe distance from the vehicle. The driver gestured animatedly, speaking in broken English. Yes, we're looking for a place. The name is..." He mentioned a location I had never heard of before. I frowned. "I don't think that's around here," I said, my voice guarded. The passenger leaned forward, speaking to the driver in rapid Italian. I couldn't understand their words, but the tone of their conversation felt off. The driver nodded, then turned back to me. No, it's close. You know." "I really don't," I said firmly, taking a step back. "Sorry." They weren't happy with that answer. The driver's expression hardened slightly, though he quickly covered it with a forced smile. "Maybe you show us the way," he suggested. I shook my head. "I can't help you," I said again. As I backed away, I noticed both men scanning me up and down. Their eyes lingered too long, and the way they appraised me made my skin crawl. I felt like a target being assessed. Without another word, I crossed the road halfway and stood in the middle of the opposite lane. It wasn't the safest place to be, but it put more distance between me and the van. I was close enough to observe them, but far enough to feel slightly less vulnerable. The driver muttered something to the passenger, who then leaned back in their seat. For a moment, I thought they might leave, but the van remained where it was, idling. I decided it was time to get out of there. Turning away from the van, I continued walking toward my house, trying to keep my pace calm and natural despite the rising panic in my chest. I kept walking, the sound of the van's idling engine fading slightly as I put more distance between us. My heart was pounding, and every instinct screamed at me to look back, but I resisted. Instead, I focused on the path ahead, determined to make it to the safety of my house. I was only one street away when I heard it again, the low growl of the van's engine. It was moving now, slowly creeping up behind me. I glanced over my shoulder just for a second, and saw the van turning down the road that ran parallel to where I was walking. My pulse quickened. They were trying to stay close. The path ahead of me curved slightly, leading to a small residential area. It was a quiet neighborhood with neatly trimmed lawns and houses spaced just far enough apart to make me feel exposed. My rented house was at the end of this street, tucked away behind a narrow footpath. As I reached the corner, I saw the van again. It had circled around and was now idling at the other end of the street, positioned to intercept me no matter which direction I took. My hands were trembling as I adjusted my bag strap, trying to appear composed. I quickened my pace, walking as fast as I could without breaking into a run. I needed to reach the path that led to my house. Halfway down the street, I heard the van's engine rev loudly. It was coming closer, the sound growing louder with each passing second. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see it barreling down the street toward me. Panic surged through me. I stepped off the road, moving closer to the sidewalk, and tried to appear indifferent, as if I hadn't noticed their erratic behavior. The van pulled up alongside me, and the driver leaned out again. "Hey, do you need a ride?" he called out, his voice smooth but insistent. "No, I'm fine," I replied, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound confident. "It's really cold outside," he said, his tone dripping with fake concern. "You could get frostbite." I shook my head. "I'm almost home," I lied, "but thank you." The driver didn't respond right away. Instead, he exchanged a look with the passenger, who smirked slightly before muttering something in Italian. "Are you sure?" the driver pressed. "It's no trouble, we're going the same way." My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Good night." I turned away from them and began walking again, forcing my legs to move despite the overwhelming fear coursing through me. The van didn't move. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked away, and the tension was suffocating. My body felt numb, not from the cold, but from the sheer terror of the situation. Finally, I reached the small path that led to my house. It was barely wide enough for a car, lined with overgrown bushes on both sides. As I stepped onto the path, I glanced back one last time. The van was still there, parked at the edge of the street. The driver was staring at me, his face partially obscured by shadows, while the passenger spoke animatedly with him. I didn't wait to see what they would do next. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding against the pavement as I raced down the path. My house was just ahead, its porch light glowing faintly in the darkness. When I reached the front door, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly that I nearly dropped them. Finally, I managed to unlock the door and slip inside, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against the door, breathing heavily as I tried to calm myself. For a moment, the only sound was the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then I heard it, the low rumble of an engine outside. I kept walking, the sound of the van's idling engine fading slightly as I put more distance between us. My heart was pounding and every instinct screamed at me to look back, but I resisted. Instead, I focused on the path ahead, determined to make it to the safety of my house. I was only one street away when I heard it again, the low growl of the van's engine. It was moving now, slowly creeping up behind me. I glanced over my shoulder just for a second and saw the van turning down the road that ran parallel to where I was walking. My pulse quickened. They were trying to stay close. The path ahead of me curved slightly, leading to a small residential area. It was a quiet neighborhood with neatly trimmed lawns and houses spaced just far enough apart to make me feel exposed. My rented house was at the end of this street, tucked away behind a narrow footpath. As I reached the corner, I saw the van again. It had circled around and was now idling at the other end of the street, positioned to intercept me no matter which direction I took. My hands were trembling as I adjusted my bag strap, trying to appear composed. I quickened my pace, walking as fast as I could without breaking into a run. I needed to reach the path that led to my house. Halfway down the street, I heard the van's engine rev loudly. It was coming closer, the sound growing louder with each passing second. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see it barreling down the street toward me. Panic surged through me. I stepped off the road, moving closer to the sidewalk, and tried to appear indifferent, as if I hadn't noticed their erratic behavior. The van pulled up alongside me and the driver leaned out again. "Hey, do you need a ride?" he called out, his voice smooth but insistent. "No, I'm fine," I replied, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound confident. "It's really cold outside," he said, his tone dripping with fake concern. "You could get frostbite." I shook my head. "I'm almost home," I lied, "but thank you." The driver didn't respond right away. Instead, he exchanged a look with the passenger, who smirked slightly before muttering something in Italian. "Are you sure?" the driver pressed. "It's no trouble. We're going the same way." My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Good night." I turned away from them and began walking again, forcing my legs to move despite the overwhelming fear coursing through me. The van didn't move. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked away, and the tension was suffocating. My body felt numb, not from the cold, but from the sheer terror of the situation. Finally, I reached the small path that led to my house. It was barely wide enough for a car, lined with overgrown bushes on both sides. As I stepped onto the path, I glanced back one last time. The van was still there, parked at the edge of the street. The driver was staring at me, his face partially obscured by shadows, while the passenger spoke animatedly with him. I didn't wait to see what they would do next. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding against the pavement as I raced down the path. My house was just ahead, its porch light glowing faintly in the darkness. When I reached the front door, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly that I nearly dropped them. Finally, I managed to unlock the door and slip inside, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against the door, breathing heavily as I tried to calm myself. For a moment, the only sound was the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then I heard it, the low rumble of an engine outside. The sound of the van's engine was unmistakable. It rumbled softly, almost as if the driver were intentionally trying not to draw attention. I held my breath, straining to hear any movement outside. After a few seconds, I mustered the courage to move to the front window, staying low as I peeked through the edge of the curtain. The van was parked directly across the street. The headlights were off, but the faint glow of the street lamp revealed its outline. Inside, I could see the driver and passenger silhouetted, their figures eerily still. What were they waiting for? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. Were they trying to see if I lived alone? Were they planning to break in? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. my hands shaking so much that it took me 2 tries to hit the right numbers. When the dispatcher answered, I struggled to keep my voice steady. "There's a van outside my house," I whispered. "The people inside have been following me. I'm scared they're going to try something." The dispatcher's calm voice was a stark contrast to my rising panic. "Stay on the line with me," she said. "Officers are on their way. Can you describe the van and the individuals inside?" I gave her as much detail as I could. The color of the van, the driver's appearance, the way they had followed me for blocks. She reassured me that help was close. But every second felt like an eternity. Outside, the van's engine revved softly, and I froze. Were they leaving? Or were they making their move? The dispatcher must have heard my sharp intake of breath. "What's happening now?" she asked urgently. "They're still out there," I whispered, "but I think they're moving closer." I risked another glance through the window. The van hadn't moved from its spot, but the passenger door was now slightly open. A wave of dread washed over me. "Stay inside," the dispatcher said firmly. "Lock all your doors and windows. Officers are only a few minutes away." I nodded even though she couldn't see me and quickly checked the locks on every door and window in the house. When I returned to the living room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The passenger had stepped out of the van. He was standing on the sidewalk, his face hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring at the house. The minutes that followed felt like hours. I stayed crouched near the window, phone clutched tightly in my hand as I watched the man outside. Then, in the distance, I saw the flashing red and blue lights of a police car. Relief flooded through me as the cruiser approached, its headlights illuminating the street. The man by the van turned his head sharply, spotting the approaching police car. Without hesitation, he climbed back into the van and the vehicle roared to life. "They're leaving," I told the dispatcher, my voice shaking with both fear and relief. "Officers are arriving now," she replied. "Stay where you are and wait for them to make contact." I watched as the van sped down the street, disappearing into the night. Moments later, the police car pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out and approached the door. I opened it cautiously, my heart still racing. The officers listened attentively as I recounted everything that had happened, from the moment the van first appeared to the way it had lingered outside my house. After taking my statement, they assured me they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for the vehicle. "If you see them again, don't hesitate to call us," one of the officers said. I nodded, grateful for their presence, but still shaken. For weeks after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I left the house, I found myself scanning the streets for any sign of the van. My roommates, who initially dismissed my fears, took the incident more seriously after I told them what happened. 2 of the girls insisted on walking me to and from campus whenever they could, and I started using ride-share services late at night instead of walking home alone. Though I never saw the van again, the memory of that night stayed with me. The way they followed me, the way they waited outside my house. It was a chilling reminder of how quickly an ordinary evening could turn into something dangerous. To this day, I don't know what their intentions were, but I'm grateful I trusted my instincts and called for help. It could have ended very differently. When I turned 16 last month, my family, my friends Ashley and Sarah, and I went on a trip to Toronto. As you might guess, we had a great time. We stayed in a hotel, went swimming, and went to the mall. After going to the mall, we went back to our hotel room, took a shower, and then just hung out. Then, around 11 p.m., when I was really bored, I knocked on the door between my friend's hotel room and the room where my parents, brother, and I slept. We didn't have anything to do, so I asked my mom if my friends and I could walk around Kensington Market. She agreed. My little brother asked if he could come along because he was bored right before we left. It was okay with me, and my parents came because they had to watch my brother. The people I live with and my brother are ahead of us. My friends and I are a little behind them, laughing and talking. Since I was getting hungry, I told my parents we needed to go get something to eat. We walked until we came to a big building that had many fast food and restaurant chains inside. It had 2 floors. There was a big staircase in the middle that led to the 2nd floor. They went to McDonald's and sat down at a table a long way from us. Sarah, my friend, wasn't very hungry, so she found us a table while Ashley and I went to the ice cream shop to get something. While we were waiting, we saw 3 guys sitting at a table close to the ice cream shop. They looked at us and whispered to each other. Then 2 of them joined us behind us in line for ice cream. This is the first time I've been here. What type of ice cream do you think I should get? Ashley asked, her voice casual but slightly hesitant as she stared at the options displayed on the menu board. Her attempt to act normal didn't ease my nerves. My attention was locked on the group of men sitting near the ice cream shop. One of them stood out in particular, a tall Jamaican man who appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s. His clothes were visibly worn and unkempt, and his eyes had an intensity that made my stomach churn. He was talking to Ashley, standing uncomfortably close, even though she was only 15. While the man spoke to her, I noticed something peculiar and alarming. He was holding a small opaque bottle, twisting its lid back and forth. It didn't seem like a normal drink bottle. There were no labels, and it looked more like something you'd find in a pharmacy. Ashley, being the sweet and friendly person she was, didn't seem to notice anything unusual. She probably thought he was just being polite, but I couldn't ignore the tension in the air. My gut told me that something about this man wasn't right. As I stood there, trying to decide what to do, the second man from their table got up and began walking toward me. My heart sank. This man was shorter than his friend, but just as unsettling. He was dressed in a white trench coat and a tilted hat, trying to pull off a polished look that felt out of place. Instead of looking stylish, it only made him seem strange and untrustworthy. "Wow, you look so different," he said, his voice low and measured, as though he were studying me. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Thanks," I replied awkwardly, hoping my nervous smile would deter him from continuing. "What kind of people are you?" he asked next, leaning slightly closer to me. His question made no sense, but the way he said it made me feel like a trapped animal. "I'm just me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and nonchalant, even though my hands were trembling. "Can I have your number?" he asked suddenly, his tone changing to one of desperation. "I just want to talk, that's all." My chest tightened. "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "I don't give my number to strangers." He didn't back down. Instead, he took a step closer. "Come on," he said, his voice almost pleading. "Just your number. I swear I won't do anything bad." I said no, I replied sharply, taking a step back. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the movement at their table. The third man had stood up and was walking toward us. My heart pounded in my chest as the fear grew stronger. The man in the trench coat wasn't done yet. "What about Snapchat?" he asked, his tone shifting to something more playful. "Can I get yours?" "No," I said again, my voice rising slightly. "I don't give my Snapchat to strangers either." He chuckled, as if my resistance amused him. "Okay," he said, but the way he smiled sent chills down my spine. And then he asked the question that made my blood run cold. "So are the two of you here by yourselves?" I froze. My mind went blank, and for a moment I couldn't think of what to say. Panic gripped me and I felt completely helpless. Thankfully, Ashley didn't miss a beat. "No," she said confidently. "Our parents are at McDonald's and our other friend is sitting at a table nearby." The two men exchanged glances, their attention shifting to Sarah, who was indeed sitting at our table. They waved at her, and Sarah, noticing their odd behavior, looked over at us with concern. Realizing that something wasn't right, she began to stand up. Before she could come to our aid, my parents appeared. "We're heading back to the hotel now," my mom said casually. "You girls can walk back. It's only 10 minutes. Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of relief and worry. My dad and brother began heading toward the escalator, and Sarah walked over to join us. "Are you guys okay?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with concern. "Yeah," I said quickly, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. We returned to our table, but I couldn't shake the sense of dread that had settled over me. My hands were still trembling and my heart hadn't stopped racing. I looked at Ashley and Sarah, both of whom seemed uneasy as well. "We need to leave," I whispered to them. "I don't feel safe here anymore." They didn't hesitate. We grabbed our things and started walking toward the elevator. The building, once bustling with people, was now eerily quiet. The silence only made the situation feel more dangerous. As we approached the elevator, I glanced behind us and felt my stomach drop. The two men were following us. "They're behind us," I whispered to Ashley, barely able to keep my voice steady. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see them, and her face went pale. "Oh no," she muttered under her breath. We stepped into the elevator and thankfully there were two other people inside, a couple standing between us and the men. The doors closed and for a moment I felt a flicker of relief, but the tension in the small space was suffocating. The elevator descended slowly, every second feeling like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, and I silently prayed for the doors to open. When we finally reached the ground floor, I nearly cried with relief. Standing near the exit was my mom, my dad, and my brother, all waiting in line at Starbucks. "Let's go to my parents," I said quickly, pulling Sarah and Ashley toward them. We hurried over, and I immediately began explaining what had happened. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice low, "those guys have been following us." My mom's expression shifted immediately. "Where?" she asked sharply. I gestured toward the elevator, just as the men stepped out. They glanced in our direction, but when they saw my parents, they stopped. A moment later, they turned and went back into the elevator. "They're going back upstairs," my mom said, her voice firm. "Let's leave now." We didn't waste any time. My parents led the way out of the building and we followed closely behind them. As we stepped outside, the crisp night air hit us, but it did nothing to calm my nerves. My parents were walking a few meters ahead, with my brother chatting excitedly about something I couldn't focus on. The three of us girls followed closely behind, glancing over our shoulders every few steps. That's when I saw him. The man with the briefcase, the one I had thought had left earlier, was standing just a few feet away from the exit. He was leaning against the wall, staring directly at us. My breath caught in my throat and I grabbed Ashley's arm. "He's here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ashley and Sarah both looked toward the man. He wasn't doing anything overtly threatening, but the intensity of his gaze was enough to send chills down my spine. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there watching us. "Keep walking," Sarah said firmly, her voice low but steady. "Don't let him know we're scared." We walked past him as quickly as we could, trying not to look directly at him. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. As we moved away, I couldn't resist glancing back to see if he was following us. Instead, I saw him walking toward a sleek black car parked near the curb. The windows were heavily tinted, making it impossible to see who was inside. The driver rolled down the window and the man leaned in, whispering something to him. A moment later, the car sped off into the night, leaving us standing there, shaken and unsure of what to do. When we finally reached our hotel room, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. As soon as the door closed behind us, Ashley broke down. "I gave them my Snapchat," she admitted, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. "I didn't know what else to do. I was too scared to say no." My stomach dropped. "What?" I said, my voice rising in panic. "Ashley, why would you do that?" "I didn't think they would actually use it," she sobbed. I didn't want them to get angry or follow us." Sarah and I exchanged worried glances. "Okay," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "We need to fix this. Turn off SnapMap right now." Ashley nodded and pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she navigated to the settings. When she opened SnapMap, her face went pale. "One of them is here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you mean, here?" I asked, my heart pounding. She held up her phone, showing us the map. One of the men's Bitmoji avatars was right next to hers on the map, indicating that he was either in or near the hotel. "Turn it off," I said urgently. Ashley quickly disabled the feature and blocked the man, but the damage had already been done. The thought that he had been able to track our location in real time was terrifying. The rest of the night passed in a tense silence. None of us could relax, and every small noise outside the hotel room made us jump. We double-checked the locks on the door at least 10 times and kept the curtains tightly closed. Thankfully, nothing else happened that night. By morning, the fear had lessened slightly, but the memory of what had happened still lingered. As we sat together at breakfast, Ashley spoke up. "What do you think they wanted?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "But whatever it was, it couldn't have been good." Sarah nodded in agreement. The way they were watching us, the way they followed us, it felt planned, like they were looking for an opportunity. We all fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The rest of our trip passed without incident, but the experience left a lasting impression on all of us. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily things could have gone differently. If my parents hadn't been there, if Sarah hadn't been paying attention, if Ashley hadn't spoken up, the possibilities were too frightening to imagine. Even now, I still think about that night whenever I'm out in public. It's a reminder to always trust your instincts and to never let your guard down, no matter how safe a situation might seem. So please, if you're reading this, stay safe out there. You never know who might be watching.